Hello friends, welcome back to the show. Today in the studio, I was joined by Justin Nault, the founder of the Clovis Culture. He's helping hundreds, thousands of people reclaim their version of radical health through a pro-metabolic lens. But we get so much more into the weeds in this conversation than just what that means from a dietary perspective. We talk about why calories in, calories out, eat less, move more might be the worst diet advice of all time. We talk about self-love and this lens of abundance versus scarcity. We hear how Justin transformed himself from a famous singer in Nashville, what seems like a lifetime ago, to this health coach now, this leader, this founder, and this person that is helping people heal their metabolisms, heal their versions of themselves, and create the life that they really want to live. So it's a fascinating show. Let's get into it with Justin Nault. Let's start with the trajectory of where you came from in the music scene, because we were talking off air a little bit and how that feels like a different lifetime now. But kind of take us on the journey of what it was like to, achieve that and be on the stages and be adored for being a musician, and then kind of being like, oh, I don't know if I fit this onesie anymore, and what kind of got you onto this path that you're on today.
Totally. I mean, that's a great story, and I try to truncate it because it goes back so far. And this is actually when I'm doing coaching and helping people make a transition to a new identity, I pull them way back and we're like, where did your identity come from? And this is where you get into ego versus shadow, which is the term shadow is probably the number one misused term that I see, especially in Austin. There's a very new age spiritual community here. But the basics of it are your ego comes from the things that got you more love as a child. Your shadow comes from the things that got you less love as a child. Because if you don't have love as a child, you die. It is an actual life or death scenario. You need to be taken care of because you're so fragile and vulnerable. So for me, I started performing at 8 years old, and all the grown-ups loved it. Freaked out. I was getting called the next Billy Joel and a phenom and all this stuff. I was doing recitals at 8 years old. People were losing their minds. And then in high school, I started playing these talent shows, became kind of a small town celebrity. I was on the news, all this stuff. And I had no idea what I wanted to do in my life. I had a 2.8 GPA in high school. I'm like, what do I do here, And then now I realized, I can play music. People really love this. I can do something with this. And I ended up applying to one school, and I got in, which was Berklee College of Music in Boston. And then I ended up, in Nashville. I'm playing 300 shows a year. I was on ABC. Damn. I landed a reality TV show at age 25. I was placing these songwriting contests at Berklee, and I was in the studio with Vince Gill and Reba McEntire and all these people. And I'm like, what is this? And it was so strange because I never, hindsight's always 20/20, but at the time, I didn't love it the way that I should have loved it to be pursuing it to the level that I was. And this is where now I just turned 38. Now I know I'm it was the external validation that kept me going. We talked about this a little bit before we started. You said you had a previous life as well where you're yeah, I'm doing pretty well. The money's pretty good. I have steady income, but something feels icky about this. And for me, I think I stayed in the industry for 5 years too long is the way I see it. I don't really believe that because everything's perfect. And I landed here because of the whole, I wouldn't change anything, But the last 5 years took a real heavy toll on me because I was drinking a lot, and I was playing the same shows over and over. And I wasn't really progressing in my career. I wasn't writing and trying to put stuff out. Because when I was younger, I had music in movies and TV shows and stuff like that. I was really doing the thing and really trying to push it. And the last 5 years, I was just on coast, on autopilot. And I called it golden handcuffs because I just wasn't really progressing in life in general, but everyone around me, the external validation is anyone who's working a 9-to-5 they hate, and then they come see me on stage, they're like, dude, you are living the dream. This is the greatest thing ever, And I'm like, guys, I'm on stage 4 hours a night, 6 nights a week. I go to bed at 5 o'clock every morning. I'm working a 9-to-5. It just basically starts at 8 p.m. And then I realized I'm missing holidays. I'm missing birthdays. I work every weekend. So I couldn't maintain healthy romantic relationships. I didn't have deep friendships at the time. I didn't really understand community until I got to Austin. So my life just had a lot of empty places. And it was actually, for me, it was the journey of psychedelics that got me to be can I actually walk away from this thing? Can I walk away from 90% of my income and move into this other space? Which was where I started learning about nutrition about 10 years ago. And I dove deep into that because I've been in fitness my whole life. I've done everything. I was a boxer in college. I'm a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. I worked with literal Olympians to learn Olympic lifting. I did CrossFit. I worked with the founders of Strong First for Pavel Tsatsouline's kettlebell stuff. I've done everything. I was in my 20s. I was 160 pounds, deadlifting 425. I was crushing myself in fitness, but then living this really unhealthy musician lifestyle, whatever. So when I started learning about nutrition, things started to change, and my body started to change. I started to feel better. All this like great stuff started to happen when I learned about nutrition, and I became really passionate about that. And at the same time, you may have heard this on Kyle's show, my brother's daughter was born terminally disabled. Her name's Savannah. Savannah is now 10. But at the time, she was born having over 300 seizures a day.
Wow.
So she was considered terminally disabled. Her life expectancy was less than 3 years. And then she was in the pediatric ICU within a week of being born. So they did like over $1 million in testing on her. And I was with like the Charlie Foundation, which is a foundation that works with toddlers and infants with epilepsy specifically. And they actually use the keto diet for these seizures. So my first introduction to keto was this.
Wow.
So I'm like, what is this ketogenic diet? You know? And I ended up going keto and like playing with it myself. But it's the mainstream medical system. So within a couple of weeks, she was put on a G tube, which is kind of like a death sentence for these babies. It was like, we really didn't want that to happen. They drill a hole in the stomach, and the child is then fed through this tube in their stomach called G tube. So they put her on a ketogenic diet, but it's mainstream medicine. So quality doesn't matter.
Yes, right.
So there's a formula called Keto Cal. This is in every pediatric ICU. I think it's made by Gerber. And all that mainstream medicine knows is it's high fat, low carb. They don't think about the quality. So I look at the ingredients on this thing. It's like seed oils, artificial flavorings, like synthetic bullshit vitamins, whatever. So I was like, this is terrible. And I showed it to the neurologist. And word for word, he's like, I never thought to check that.
Yeah. Crazy.
And that was like basically my red pill moment. So I actually went home. I talked to Rob Wolf a bit, and I got a bunch of like paleo superfoods, food dehydrators, processors, and made a paleo baby formula out of like paleo superfoods, cleared it with the Vanderbilt neurologist, started giving it to Savannah in her G-tube, and I just read the 4-Hour Work Week. And I was like, I think there's something here. I think I can like make a business out of this. So I added a ton of collagen protein and turned it into a protein powder, started selling it to CrossFitters.
Wow.
And then from there, people started asking me tips on nutrition. And my experience with the medical system is what sent me way down the rabbit hole, which is now, you know, what both attracts people to my work and gets me the most amount of hate online is really, I'm just like quite anti-mainstream and going down those rabbit holes of like, you know, mainstream medicine is the 3rd leading cause of death in America.
Yes.
So when I start to reveal these things to people, that's why the podcast got popular. Because I'm just like sharing these rabbit holes that I went down, and people are like, wait, what? Are you kidding me? You know, and that's where we landed here today, is I ended up doing like 250 plus episodes of the podcast. The Facebook group now has, you know, over 12,000 people. We got 400,000 followers on TikTok, and it's just like getting bigger and bigger through. That was the process.
It's crazy, man. What a fascinating story. And I'm so happy to hear that your niece is now 10, and just the power of what's possible when you really lean into nutrition and all the other rabbit holes that opens up, the lifestyle stuff and all of it, man. It's really fascinating. And I definitely want to talk to you about your nutritional views, because like you said, it puts you in a position where it's really attractive to some. It gets you a lot of hate from the evidence-based crowd. And, you know, those folks love to come at people that have a contrarian stance on this. But I'm also very curious to examine why you start with self-love above all else.
Yeah, that's a great question. The way that I word it with clients initially is I genuinely believe that the number one reason for obesity is people are living a life that they don't want to live. And I don't mean that from a mental health perspective or like a depression or suicide type angle, even though like we know depressed and anxious subjects generate 20% less ATP in studies. Like it's a low energy problem, but that's a different story. I really do think that it's easier to make healthy choices for yourself from the place of self-love. So many people are waking up every day. They already don't like what they see in the mirror, and then their body becomes the enemy, right? So it becomes this, I hate this body. I wake up every day. I step in the mirror. I'm already in a bad mood. I don't like the way I look, and it becomes a game of punishment. The body is the enemy. I'm going to stick you in a cold plunge. I'm going to put you in the sauna. I can't eat because I haven't hit my 16-hour fasting window yet, and I'm following a 1,200 calorie a day diet, and that 1,200 calorie is a low carb diet, and all these different things, right? And then I'm going to go to the gym on top of that, and it causes this low energy crisis, and it's all through a place of self-loathing. So if I can get people to switch from trying to get healthy from a place of self-loathing, scarcity, restriction, and shift it to the lens of abundance and self-love and nourishment, everything changes. So before I even talk to obese people about eating less food, I start with nourishment. Let's give you all the vitamins and minerals you're lacking from years of dieting and years of all these restriction and all these things. And then they start to feel a little better. Their energy gets a little better. Their mood's a little better. And they're like, wow, I'm feeling better. Maybe I'm going to go for a walk. Okay, let's start with a 10-minute walk and get some sunshine on your skin. Hey, Justin, I went for a 10-minute walk and got some sunshine on my skin. I feel a little better. Okay, great. Let's make another healthy decision. And that when you start to switch the lens, the way I help people understand it is if someone comes to me drinking, 10 Pepsis a day, and I'm like, hey, listen, like we got to cut back on the Pepsi. And their brain is like, oh my God, here's another nutritionist telling me what I can't have. I love Pepsi and what the hell? I can't have my favorite Pepsi. This sucks. Restriction. Versus if I can educate you to the point where you understand that Pepsi is poison, then you can say, I love myself so much, I would never knowingly poison myself. That's a different lens to view health and wellness through. Because now food is no longer the enemy, which is why what I start with is self-love. Number one, literally day one, you come to me, I'm going to have you stand in a mirror and say, I love you to yourself. And it's going to feel weird at first if you've never done it. So we start with self-love and we start with a very basic concept, which is food versus poison. And this is where I get so much hate from the evidence-based crowd, and I don't care at all. Pop-Tarts, poison. Grass-fed steak, food. Organic Fuji apple, food. Doritos, poison. You could walk through the forest every day for the next 100 years, and you will never stumble upon a bagel tree. It's not going to happen. If we can simplify health and wellness for people in that way, everything gets easier. It's just unfortunately we live in such a toxic food environment where when I teach people these lessons, they go through their house and they're like 90% of what is here is poison. So it's a big lifestyle switch. I'm asking people to make big changes and I ask them to go all in. I ask them to go cold turkey. Here's a list of over 100 foods that I've hand selected that you can choose from. Nobody, no human in the history of the world before modern society has had access to over 100 foods of their choosing. Has plenty of variety. But if it's not on the list, you don't eat it. And we're going to do this for 90 days, and we're going to see what happens. But we have to simplify things in that way. Self-love and food versus poison.
In the typical client journey that you'd usually see, what is it about the act of committing to these things that gets them those little wins every day that actually does evolve to a place eventually where they can say, I actually do love myself? Because it's one thing to say, like, it's got to start with self-love, right? But like you were saying, so many people are just living this pseudo life where they're trying to get some sense of love through the conditions, the conditional love of like, well, they'll love me more if I'm a famous singer. And then you're like, actually, no, that's not for me, right? That's not unconditional love. That's conditional love. So you must have come across this a lot, especially with people that have, body dysmorphia and maybe they're soothing with food or they're trying to get their needs met, right? Ice cream loves me, so I'm going to love that. And then you're taking it away and also saying, love yourself. Like what's some of the common pitfalls or some of the common resistance along that journey, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is that everything that I teach, I've done myself. So like I've lived this, hundreds of people every night being like, you have the greatest voice I've ever heard, being judged very harshly, not harshly, like positively. Part of my career was that I look the way that I do and people liked that, but I've suffered with body dysmorphia. I went into high school 5'2", 195 pounds. I was a fat kid and my brother and his older friends picked on me for it, but I grew up watching Arnold Schwarzenegger movies. So I had just like epic body dysmorphia that followed me. I had disordered eating till like probably my mid-20s before I found paleo and all that stuff. So I was like, I know what this is, to just punish yourself as much as possible through the lens of hating your body. So I can teach self-love very well because I didn't have it and I had to gain it. And everyone's journey is a little bit different and I can share the way that mine went. But what I found is it's just like any other skill. If a 18-year-old skinny kid comes to me and he's got no biceps and he wants biceps, he's got to put in some bicep curls. He's got to put in the reps. Self-love is no different. You have to practice self-love. The number of people, some of the biggest resistance I see with clients is they'll be 60 days in and they're like, kind of following the foods list, kind of doing the thing, kind of. And I'm like, have you done your mirror work, which is a daily non-negotiable? And they're like, ugh. I'll be honest with you, man. I've done it twice in the last 60 days and like my face gets red and I just feel weird and like I say it like twice and then I leave the bathroom. And I'm like, can you pause and sit with that? Really think about that. You're alone in a bathroom. There's nobody watching you. There's nobody to be embarrassed by. Your face is getting red. You feel embarrassed. You feel comfortable and uncomfortable and you walk out of that bathroom. There's nobody watching you. It's just you. It's me, myself, and I, right? That's what I was faced with is my love of self was conditional. you know, because I was living my life through the lens of other esteem, as I call it. It's like there's self-esteem is very rare these days. Like most people are basically judging themselves on external validation, which is really other esteem. I feel good about myself if other people tell me that I am XYZ, I'm talented, I'm handsome, I'm whatever. And I live that and it's empty. I ended up with a 6-night-a-week drinking habit with that much love coming at me all the time.
Right.
You know, so I really had to like genuinely practice this. And then that's really hard because, you know, I started my journey of personal development through what I call Tim Ferriss personal development, which is like, I do the morning routine, I do these non-negotiables, I'm like everything, I must do the thing, I must get it perfectly.
Optimized to death.
Optimized to death,
Yeah.
exactly, right. Whereas like, and I do think that non-negotiables are important. Like my phase of the journey with Tim Ferriss personal development and starting my business and everything was super important for me. But I was over-intellectualizing everything.
Yeah.
And I couldn't feel. So the key to self-love, in my opinion, is teaching people how to feel and teaching people how to get comfortable with their own emotional expression. But it involves us peeling back all the layers and the fact that they're dealing with constant emotional suppression and repression. So it can feel pretty painful before it gets better.
Right.
But it's a requirement. It's the same way that your first bicep workout, the next day you're going to be like, wow, I'm so sore. That was brutal. Like I better eat more food to like care for myself. And that's the other piece is I'm like, as I'm peeling back the layers of this onion in one-on-one coaching and people are like dealing with a lot of painful things that they haven't processed, I'm like, okay, now you see it's important for you in this state to nourish yourself. When you're hungry, don't avoid that. That's your body's most basic survival instinct. It's asking you for nourishment. Every time you're hungry, it's an opportunity to nourish yourself, which is an act of self-love. Every time you stand in the mirror and say, I love you, it's an act of self-love. Every time you get on a call with me because you want to better yourself, it's an act of self-love. Like all these little things, the self-love is also sort of earned. Like you're getting to a place of unconditional love eventually. But in the beginning, you have to put the reps in of like actually practicing loving yourself and showing up for yourself. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. I love the practicality in that. I think, it's a term that gets thrown around. It's kind of wishy-washy, you know, just love yourself.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that's what's missing. Like, well, telling somebody to just love themselves who doesn't just makes them feel worse.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, it starts with self-love. Go love yourself. And they look at themselves and like, I hate myself. So you have to gather the evidence. You have to build that stack of proof that like, oh, I'm doing the things that align with my higher self, my potential, the version of me that I do love and I am loving into existence. And I think it's so important because I think it would probably come at the end of most people's journey more classically. And I like that you front load this and say like, let's start here. And let's combine that with some practical, you know, food choices, eating real food and the bioenergetic approach, if you will, because I've heard you say we have an energy availability crisis or something to the like. And that's something, again, that confuses a lot of people, especially when we see overweight people, because in the evidence-based crowd, again, it's just they've got a surplus of energy. They should just eat less and move more, which I've heard you say is some of the worst dietary advice of our time. So explain that a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's the worst health advice we could possibly give people. And the reason for that is it's confusion around terminology, right? So you'll hear people say, well, of course you're going to lose weight in a calorie deficit because thermodynamics. And if I make a video that says people can be in a technical calorie deficit and storing body fat, people will say this violates thermodynamics, whatever. So, but you're sitting here in the terminology, right? So it's like thermodynamics, energy can either be created or destroyed, all these different things, right? You're making an assumption that if you're in a calorie deficit, that the body is automatically going to pull from fat stores, which is not what happens. And this is where you have, I don't know if you know this term, it's kind of recent, like the last 10 years where it's really become sort of an epidemic, which is sarcopenic obesity. Sarcopenic obesity is people with very low skeletal muscle mass, osteoporosis, and they are obese.
Yeah.
You put that person in a calorie deficit, like their bones are falling apart. Their muscle mass is melting away. And they're still storing body fat. Why is that? Because storing body fat is not a bad thing. It's an adaptation mechanism for the body trying to survive in an unnatural environment. And this is why the calories in, calories out crowd is so harmful. Because one of the number one reasons that the body stores body fat is to pull toxins out of the bloodstream and store them in a safe place so they don't cause problems.
Yeah.
Right? So there are all these different mechanisms from the beginning of like beta oxidation and glycolysis all the way down to the electron transport chain. All of these sensitive little steps that can be impacted by inflammation, that can be impacted by toxins, that can literally turn the fat storage switch on. It can tell the body, yo, we need to store some fat, right? Same with seed oils. Seed oils impacting phospholipid membranes at the level of the mitochondria and the cell. People are wasting ATP. They're not creating ATP. They're losing energy. So you end up with people, it's very clear. If you've ever worked with obese people, most of them come to you, let's say they're 150 pounds overweight. They are going to tell you, I'm tired all the time. I'm cold all the time. My hair is falling out in the shower. I have no libido. I'm in a bad mood. I can't get to the gym because I just can't bring myself to get up off this couch. Like, this is very clearly an issue of low energy. Now, if we decide to have that person fast, if we put them on a dry fast for 14 days, they're going to lose some body weight. Yes. But is that good for their metabolism?
Right.
No. So it's become this game of weight loss at all costs, no matter what. And I take the opposite approach, is if we nourish the body to correct all of this dysfunction that is telling the body to store fat when it shouldn't be storing fat, that's where a lot of the benefits come in. So it's like we're focusing on the entire world of cold plunging, fasting, working out, keto, carnivore, low carb, all these things is just lipolysis, lipolysis, lipolysis. We want to burn as much fat as possible. And they don't pay attention at all to the fat storage side of things, which is critically important, because when someone is in a state of ketosis, they are burning more fat, more lipolysis has happened. They're also storing more body fat. So it's the same, right? If we like pump your system full of sugar, you're going to have high blood glucose levels. If we pump your system full of ketones, you're going to have a high ketone level if you measure the blood marker. It's why you can take ketone IQ and immediately be in ketosis by a blood draw, this kind of thing. So it's really focusing on improper mechanisms. So most of diet culture advice is actively harming individuals. And this is where, like, to give you the best example of this is I have something that we call Clovis babies. My company is called Clovis. Clovis babies are people who came to Clovis infertile, trying multiple rounds of IVF with no luck, spending tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars. They come to Clovis. We feed them food, not poison. 9 months later, they conceive a baby naturally. They send me a picture of their pregnant belly, and they're so happy, and they're crying, and they're thanking me for changing their life. This is the low energy problem. The infertility epidemic is a low energy epidemic. Think about the basic survival mechanism of that. If you're sending a signal to your body, again, we're just little human adaptation machines. If these women are chronically dieting, sending a signal to their body that there is scarcity in the environment, the last thing the human organism would do from a survival standpoint is bring another mouth to feed into this world. It's very simple, man. And this is where we go back in time, like the 1939 Yearbook of Agriculture showed that the average 155-pound man in New York City was eating 4,200 calories a day.
Wow.
Obesity was non-existent. Heart disease was non-existent. Diabetes was non-existent. Now, also where we run into trouble is also these people didn't look like you and I. I have 135 pounds of muscle on me. It's completely unnatural.
Right.
It's an anti-survival thing that I'm doing here. Like, it's too metabolically expensive for me to look the way that I do. But we live in this world where we have these people with six-pack abs that are absolutely shred city, and they're on peptides and all the top. It's like Huberman is like on TRT and peptides and all this stuff, right? So we have all these guys that are like, or like the Atias of the world or whoever, that are like ripped and shredded, completely bald because they're in a low energy state, and they're like, I am the picture of health. I lift weights every day and I'm on TRT and peptides, and you're like, bro. Yeah. So we're taking health advice from completely unnatural bodies, and we're saying like that's the picture of health. It's not. So from every angle, this thing is broken.
Yeah, it's fascinating, man, when you really kind of like flip it on its head. And that story you mentioned about the Clovis babies reminds me of your kind of original red pill moment where you showed the doctor and he was like, the ingredients. He's like, wow, I've never thought of that. Like, how many of those people that had done tens of thousands of dollars of IVF ever had somebody say, what are you eating?
Yeah.
Or what's your stress management look like? So because again, everything's a quick fix, or it's this lens of scarcity, as you call it, and you're trying to really get people into this lens of abundance. So what are some of the biggest needle movers, the practical steps to get people into a higher energy state?
Yeah, super practical is I basically call it my top 5 pro-metabolic daily habits. So this is like, if you come work with me one-on-one, we're going to dial everything in. I'm going to do an extensive health assessment. If you have blood work, we're going to look at it. Metabolic testing, we're going to get a resting metabolic rate test done to see how many calories you actually burn at rest, so we're not guessing. I don't know why more people don't do this with clients, but it's a lot. If you don't want to hit your macros and track your food every day and do all these things, there's 5 things you can do. Number 1 is removing seed oils, and we can go down the seed oil rabbit hole if you want to. Number 2, 30 grams of protein within 30 minutes of waking up. And yes, this goes against intermittent fasting advice, but you can also intermittent fast at night. You can finish dinner earlier. So number 1, remove seed oils. Number 2, 30 grams of protein within 30 minutes of waking up. Number 3 would be finding your ideal body weight and getting 1 gram of protein per pound of ideal body weight every day. Number 4 is just going for walks after meals. So if you're completely sedentary, let's say you have 3 meals a day. At the end of every full meal, you just step outside, set a timer for 5 minutes on your phone and walk. And when the timer goes off, turn around and come home. That's going to give you 30 minutes of walking a day, 10 minutes after each meal. And then the 5th is sun exposure. This can be tricky for people, but if you can see the sunrise and see the sunset every day with the naked eye, no sunglasses, no sunscreen, and then preferably get a little bit of sun exposure during the middle of the day with higher UV, even if it's 10 minutes, this will change your life. These 5 things, if you do them consistently, if you did that for 90 days, your health will transform for just about everybody who's not currently doing those things. It's that simple. And it's really not that much when you think about it.
Yeah. I want to pull on number 2, the 30 grams of protein within 30 minutes of waking up. What's the why behind that?
So basically, all of the cells in your body work like a clock, right? My favorite example of this is recently the eclipse happened here in Texas, right? And this was a full eclipse. The sun was completely covered. And I was laughing to myself because I'm looking up at this eclipse and we had some little children running around, our friends' kids, and the sun gets covered. And all of a sudden, there's bats flying around. Yeah. There's birds chirping.
Frogs and stuff.
There's grasshoppers and stuff, crickets. And I'm like, wow, it is nighttime. It's like nighttime for 3 minutes. And then the sun comes out and all that stops. Now there's like different birds chirping and the grasshoppers are quiet and the bats have gone away. They're likely very confused, right? Because every single living organism on Earth is based on a clock. And the Earth is a magnet and the sun is this big giant regulator of all of our circadian rhythms, right? So generally speaking, when you wake up in the morning, you want that bolus of protein, turn the metabolism on, the thermic effect of food. You're telling the system, it's time to go. Here's some energy. We're about to go do things, right? The reverse of that, especially in obese people, the largest bolus of food is happening at night. Most people come home from work, their biggest meal is dinner, and then they're snacking, watching TV or something into the evening. So they have all this food coming into the system, and then they go to sleep. So at some point, you have to train your body what to do with the substrate that you're giving it, right? Food, and there's another word for food, substrate, right? You have to tell your body what to do with this food, right? So the same reason that we're seeing the sun, there's specific types of red light, different types of UV that are happening as the sun comes up. It's basically red light therapy. And then the same in the evening, right? So like the fastest way to solve sleep problems is to watch the sunrise and watch the sunset. Same thing. Your body is one big giant clock. And this is like a very sort of new emerging field called quantum biology. Dr. Jack Kruse talks a lot about this. But basically the sun is sending signals to your body of what to do. And when you eat your food is doing something as well. So there are books written about this, about like the circadian rhythm of the gut microbiome, you know, all these little things. So we're just sending signals to the body that are more aligned with how, again, heart and soil, all these things, right? Is like how ancestral humans would have lived.
Yes.
That make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. On the Kruse point, he said something recently and it just landed like a ton of bricks. He's like, most people mistake the eyes as vision centers and they're really clocks that tell the time using light.
Yes.
And I was like, wow, what a beautiful way of saying it.
Totally.
But everything, like you said, you know, the light piece is really important. I think that was your step number 3, circadian natural behaviors, but the eating is also a way to entrain these clocks. And if you're not sleeping well, you're not going to be necessarily healing and digesting that food. And you're certainly not going to be in a pro-metabolic state. You'll probably be in a catabolic state where you're breaking down and it's stressful and it's tissue destructive and so on. What, from a food standpoint, what are some of the things that you're looking for, whether it's macronutrient composition or even just specific foods? What are some of like your top hitters in terms of like, these are the foods that you want to be prioritizing?
Yeah, that's a great example. Great question, because the 30 grams of protein within 30 minutes of waking up, and then the other basically pro-metabolic daily habit of getting enough protein. I have a thermometabolic foods list, which is over 100 foods I've hand selected for maximum metabolism boosting qualities, meaning you're going to generate the most amount of ATP. And I actually have clients measure their basal body temperature at different times throughout the day. And we track it over time and we see dramatic improvement. When obese people come to me, their waking body temperature is like 95. I want to see at least 97.6. This is like a walking corpse. Like when you have low energy, that's what it's like. So the very first page is super proteins. Super proteins are animal-based products that are the most nutrient-dense foods gram for gram. They have the most vitamins and minerals, which are driving metabolic function, right? So again, like, and that's the other piece about the 30 grams of protein within 30 minutes of waking up. We're telling the clock what to do, but also we know from studies. Obviously, intermittent fasting is like a big, hugely popular thing. Within 12 hours of fasting, your thyroid function is downregulated.
Yeah.
Now, when we have obese people who have been following low-calorie diets for a very long time, they're already not producing enough energy. The last thing we want to do is downregulate their metabolism. So if you've been asleep for 8 hours, 7, 8, 9 hours, it's a good idea to get up and eat preferably super proteins, which my favorite is pasture-raised eggs first thing in the morning. This is a super protein, loads of vitamins and minerals. It's going to ramp up the metabolic rate. The thermic effect of food is going to be really high. You're getting a lot of vitamins and minerals first thing in the morning. Tell that thyroid, hey, listen, we're not in scarcity. There's plenty of food available. Let's ramp up energy production, right? So we're trying to just remove toxins is the next piece of this. So page 1, super proteins, the most nutrient-dense foods gram for gram. Then the entire rest of that list is the most bioavailable foods, meaning your body can digest them the easiest. And we're removing, lectins, gluten, all these different like anti-nutrients, plant toxins, whatever you want to call them, that can disrupt metabolic function. And people freak out in the beginning. It's like, well, what about quinoa? Quinoa is not on your list. But I'm like, look, this is not a mistake. We're keeping it very, very simple. And I think when you get into the carnivore stuff of like oxalates and all these different things, like, listen, if you're living with peak optimal health and your metabolism is just like crushing it, you got a high metabolic rate and you're feeling great, like something like an oxalate is not going to be a problem for you. But if you are waking up with 95 degree, and anyone listening to this podcast right now, tomorrow, put a thermometer next to your bed on your nightstand. When you open your eyes to wake up, don't sit up, don't get out of bed, don't go to the bathroom, just grab that thermometer, put it under your tongue, tell me what the reading is. If it's 95, you got stuff to work on. We have to increase metabolic rate. We have to get your body producing energy properly. And you can watch the craziness of this too with obese people. Sometimes they'll take their body temperature and they're like, oh, Justin, I was 97. That's not so bad, right? I'm like, all right. And then I have them eat breakfast and take their temperature 30 minutes after eating breakfast. And all of a sudden they get a reading of 95. Now, in a functioning human metabolism, when you just put a bunch of substrate in the system, 30 minutes later, your metabolic rate should be higher.
Should go up, yeah.
You're using that food to generate energy. This is where we're able to clearly see metabolic dysfunction and know that 97 temperature in the morning, you're running on stress hormones.
Yeah.
Your body is forcing itself out of bed. Most people are waking up with an alarm clock and they're trained, I have to get up, I have to get going no matter how I feel. Catecholamines, these stress hormones are spiking and we're getting an artificial reading.
Yeah.
Then we test them again after breakfast and they're like, oh, wow, it turns out like really 95. I'm like, all right, yeah, we got work to do.
Right.
So it's just, why would we not remove any and all potential metabolic disruptors and just hyperload vitamins and minerals? Why would we not do that? It doesn't make any sense not to.
Yeah. Well, it's super interesting on so many fronts. Could go in so many directions here, but you mentioned like the thermic effect of feeding. That the protein is literally raising metabolism and giving the raw building blocks for life, vitamins and minerals. And at the same time, we know that the evidence-based crowd actually knows that's the one thing that you guys like Lane Norton will be like, yeah, protein's great. And then in the same sentence be like, but if it fits your macros, it doesn't really matter because essentially it's all about energy balance.
Yeah.
What do you think's like really going on with this curious case of credentialism that we have, that, the PhDs and these very bright people, but they just can't seem to get over this, this hump really, that is just, it ultimately is all calories, and somebody like you, metabolism fixer. They're like, no, you can't break metabolisms. Like, how do you just continue to stay sane and keep putting out information despite so much backlash from these very intelligent people, these very smart people?
Yeah, I'll start by saying the reason why I always say this, I'm immune to online hate, because I don't judge the people that hate me. That's just 20 years of personal development. I can teach people how to get there. I can tell them, I believe reality is completely subjective. That will make some people think that I'm literally crazy. When you drop an apple, it falls down, gravity. I'm like, yeah, sure. Who invented gravity? Like all this stuff is just humans trying to explain unexplainable phenomenon, right? And they're really trying to wrap their heads around. Like, this is why the nutrition space is so toxic. Yeah. People get mad at you like you have attacked their identity. And the reason why for me it's like water off a duck's back is because I don't consider my ideas my identity, right? And then I have empathy as well, because a lot of these guys, like you said, like Peter Attia, Lane Norton, all these guys, they're brilliant guys, super sharp. The issue is they believe in something very strongly. They believe in an authority, a perceived authority that I don't believe in. And we just saw this with, I don't even know what words we can use on podcasts anymore, but like jabs and pandemics and trust the science and this whole thing, right? It's like there is a dogmatic religion of science that people fall into, and then they attach their identity to it. If you are guys like us and you operate in the land of e-commerce and like selling supplements or selling coaching or whatever, it's like, yo, academia, especially mainstream medical academia, is a marketing funnel. Mm-hmm. It's no different than Herbalife. We're going to train our sales reps really well on how all of our products solve all of your problems. And if you just buy our products, we will fix all of your problems. The problem is when you see my buddy Zach Tellender, he lives here in Austin. Zach and Derek from More Plates, More Dates did the charlatan video. Here's what charlatans are. They expose Liver King, all this stuff. And the idea of a charlatan is like always on the offensive, in-group, out-group language, claiming to have sacred knowledge, blah, blah, blah. They'll look at guys like me who are literally like, hey, man, just eat real food, get in the sun, go for walks. And they're like, quack, you're spreading dangerous misinformation, blah, blah, blah. The only difference is the ultimate charlatan is the mainstream. They just have the best propaganda machine. And guys like Lane and guys like Peter and even Huberman, right? I don't think their egos will allow them to see that they are a product of a marketing funnel. That's the way that I see it. So you play this ego game in the world where people will be like, hey, man, this PhD, he made a video about you and he was being real mean and he was saying nasty things. I don't even watch it. Yeah. I don't care. I don't actually believe in your perceived authority. I don't believe in the perceived authority of the ivory tower that granted you your credentials. You're hanging your hat on your credentials. Therefore, you think your opinion is worth more than mine. I fundamentally do not believe that. And the way I explained this to Kyle on his podcast, when was the last time you walked into a conventional medical doctor's office and you saw a wall of body transformations? We took this person from 300 pounds to 150 pounds. They're no longer diabetic. They're off all their medications. This person's mental health is better, right? I have a private Facebook group with over 12,000 people. People that have lost hundreds of pounds that have videos crying about how I changed their life. There are Clovis tattoos on people's skin.
And babies.
And Clovis babies, right? These are my credentials.
Yeah.
And the strangest thing about America, I do not understand this. The higher your level of credentials, the less required you are to produce positive results of any kind, which is how you end up with 300-pound bald doctors giving you medication. Oh, you feel bad? Take this medication. Take this medication. I'm like, why are you taking advice from this person? Yeah. It doesn't make any sense. So there's this huge game happening online that is based on your belief in the perceived authority that grants these credentials. I see it as a marketing funnel. And I saw it with my niece. I've been there. I've been in the gnarliest fucking medical settings that you can imagine. Little tiny babies being fed products by fucking Gerber, a for-profit formula company that our tax dollars are paying for, that's subsidized. And again, mainstream medicine, third leading cause of death in America. What are the top two? Chronic diseases that mainstream medical claims to have the answers for. Yes. In what world is this normal? Like I wholeheartedly believe if you just like sit here in the scientific dogma of like following mainstream medicine, you are going to be on the wrong side of history. Give it enough years, you know? Guys like me are being called quacks today, and then like every single year you see study after study after study that's coming out that's proving these things, you know? It's crazy. Like I don't understand it. I don't understand the credential, the love of like credentials, you know?
Yeah, I wrestle with it a lot too, because like you said, you've got whatever you want to call it, 12,000 bits of data and hundreds of testimonials, and it clearly works. And people will just be like, well, it doesn't matter because you don't have the DR before your name or the PhD after your name. And it's kind of wild. And I think you made a very, very good point about attaching your identity to your ideas or to your credentials, because if you haven't done maybe enough self-development, and, you know, power to Lane, and God love him, but he doesn't strike me as a guy that's done a lot of self-development. You know, he strikes me as quite a triggered, angry, like reactive guy. Maybe that's just his thing on Instagram. Maybe he's super chill in real life, but there's a certain depth you get to when you dive into transformative practices. For you, you said it was plants. It could be meditation, prayer, just therapy. It could be so many different ways, but you start to realize, I'm not my thoughts, and I don't need to hang my whole being on my thoughts. Therefore, if somebody attacks my thoughts, like they come after my video, okay, they just see the world differently. And I can stand in that, you know, that self-esteem of being like, I know this works because I've got the proof. I'm living it, I feel it, I believe it, and I've also helped hundreds of other people do that. Yeah. And I think that's all you need at the end of the day. Ultimately, get right with yourself and help people along the way, right?
Yeah, and I think this is a deeper thing. We can go down this rabbit hole if you want. I didn't anticipate going here, but like I think, you know, I have had to learn a lot about marketing. and entrepreneurship over the years. And what I have seen is the most glorified people in entrepreneurship, the richest, the most successful, the biggest followings, like, and I'll just say it, like an Alex Hormozi type, deeply traumatized individual. Mm-hmm. Like, we take deeply traumatized humans and we put them on these pedestals, and we're like, we need to listen to this person. Like, listen to Peter Attia talk. He will tell you he was a total insufferable asshole until his late 30s. Mm-hmm. Listen to Hormozi talk. I'm very rich. Okay. I work 16 hours a day until I can't keep my eyes open, and then I watch some Netflix and maybe talk to my wife, and I state very publicly that my romantic relationship is run like a business.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we have like the Tim Ferriss situation where you're like, this guy has changed countless millions of people's lives. I owe so much to Tim Ferriss. I think he's an incredible human being. He like started me on my personal development journey. And then recently, like, he's on Chris Williamson's podcast. He would really like to have a romantic relationship, but he doesn't. Yeah. He really wants to have children and can't seem to figure out the romantic part, even though he's done zillions of podcasts on couples and nonviolent communications and relationships. Guys, you can't intellectualize your way into everything. So you have someone like a Hormozi where the other 90% of the human development just isn't there, but he makes so much money that people worship him.
Yeah.
Or you have Huberman, who has the fifth largest podcast in the world, right? And he has these credentials and he's in academia and all these things. I think a lot of it is just people listening to scientific study speak so they can just feel like they're smarter. Yeah. You know, it's like this big ego game that we play. And most of what I'm doing with clients is getting them to feel. You know, the feeling trumps the protocol. And that is the exact opposite of like the David Goggins, stay hard, motherfucker. You get up and you do it no matter what, no matter how you feel. And I'm like, that guy is literally running from demons, internal demons. Yeah. You know, he got like 2 knee surgery replacements and then did a podcast with Lewis Howes and did 100 push-ups on stage, like days after recovering from his surgery. I'm like, ooh, that doesn't feel like self-love to me, man. You know? And I just like, sometimes I feel like I'm living in the Twilight Zone, which is why like, I don't play the game of the debates and the fighting and this person made a video about me and I'm going to respond to them, whatever, because I know a lot of 9 and 10 figure entrepreneurs behind the scenes. Yeah. It doesn't go well. Yeah. You know, it's like, do I think you can get there and be super happy and healthy? 100%. But you need to be willing to do a lot of personal development, you know, to get to these places and to be able to do it from a place of abundance and self-love, not doing it from a place of, I have something to prove, I have a chip on my shoulder, I believe that life is a zero-sum game and I'm going to win the game. You know, like I use these terms with clients because I teach a lot of entrepreneurs to make money. I have this whole program that I'm building, teaching influencers how to make their first $10,000 organically, doing what they love. And I'm like, money is as available as oxygen. That's very triggering for a lot of people to hear. They're like, what are you talking about? Money is only hard. I'm like, you have a story that it's hard. You have a story everything's hard. You have a story that health and wellness is hard. Getting healthy sucks. It's constant restriction, and I'm going to be hungry all the time, and I have to go to the gym even if I don't feel like it, and I'm going to punish myself. So I'm telling you, man, like, or even in business, right? It's like, you're not an entrepreneur unless you're sleeping under your desk and sleeping 4 hours a night and whatever. I'm like, okay, that's your reality tunnel. Yes. Go exist in that reality tunnel. And there is a time and place for doing hard things. You know, for sure. I've done a lot of hard things, you know, and I gained a lot from doing those hard things. But at some point, you have to understand what you're doing. Are you doing the hard thing because you have something to prove, because you desperately want to feel something or whatever? Or are you doing the hard thing because you do things you enjoy the challenge, you like seeing what your body's capable of? There's a whole different lens to view things. There is. And I think of myself like an eye doctor. That's really what my coaching is. It's like, you have this lens. Oh, it's a little blurry. Let's try a new one. Okay, let's try a new one. I just help people like view their own reality through a lens that makes life better. Yeah. And if you're working with a coach and your life isn't getting better, just get a different coach, man. Yeah. You know? It's super powerful. I said something similar. It's like this shift in perspective thing that you're on here, the power of our stories and how, unfortunately for ourselves, we like to be right. So if we have a negative story, we just see all the information that proves it right. And then, you know, you can get into those reality tunnels. And I think what great coaches do, they don't do, like they have a canvas and they're painting the client as the canvas and they say, like, this is how it should be painted. And everybody do what I say because it's based on this protocol or this science or this PhD. When the greatest coach actually like gives the client back the paintbrush and is like, paint your own masterpiece and do it from, you know, switching up things and seeing things differently. And I think that's it. It reminded me when you were speaking of, I think you said this on Kyle's, you were actually in the middle of a WOD one day and just had this like
what am I doing? And kind of dropped the weight and ran out. And I'm sure that changed the story. Like, now I'm curious about how your stories are evolving and how you do strike a balance. Because I think I've also heard you say that you do have a little bit of that energy in you. You know, you wouldn't have pursued like that Goggins kind of Jocko mentality. But where do you balance it? Where do you find like the flow in the order and chaos? Yeah,
bro, I was obsessed. That's the thing. I love these guys, man. You know, like, I'm not talking shit here. Like, Jocko Willink's extreme ownership and discipline equals freedom, and obsessed. Yeah. I was obsessed, and it changed my life. So it's like, these hard things will change your life. But what I don't see, and this is why I call my coaching personal evolution coaching, is I don't see people evolve out of that. Like, you should probably get out of the Goggins mentality before you're 60 years old and your body is deteriorating and falling apart, right? But these things like extreme ownership for Jocko, I love the concept of extreme ownership. And I teach people that all the time. But extreme ownership, like, if you decide you want to wake up at 4:30 and swing kettlebells, you can hold yourself accountable to that totally. That's amazing. You should totally do that. But, you know, if you're 300 pounds and your health is suffering and you have low libido and your hair's falling out and you're tired all the time, should you be getting up at 4:30 and swinging kettlebells and adding stress to your system? Probably not. Can you eventually get to a place where, if you prioritize nutrition first and prioritize recovery and nourishment, that you can eventually swing kettlebells? Yeah, for sure. But what I'm saying is we can adopt these principles like extreme ownership and use them in every sense of the word. The biggest thing I coach is how you do something is how you do everything. Like you said, these coaches are trying to paint this person's masterpiece. I am a mirror. That's all that I am. In my opinion, this is how consciousness works. You are talking to yourself through a lens that you have called Justin. And the unique consciousness experience that you are having with Justin is going to bring you to answers that already exist within yourself. This is why people love podcasts so much. You're going to hear things in this conversation that resonate with you, that make you learn things about yourself. Maybe part of my story resonates with you and you're like, wow, I never thought about it that way. The extreme ownership piece, the biggest thing that I'm doing with clients is I help them see I'm going to constantly hold a mirror up to them. So if we're 60 days in and you say, this program doesn't work, I haven't lost any weight. And then we go back, I have a weekly progress report that you have to fill out. I look at your macros. Are you hitting your macros? Are you hitting the approved foods list? We go back and you've eaten off the approved foods list 2 days of the last 60 days. Your life is not going to change the way you want it to. So what I believe good coaches do is you say you want to be at this end goal. You're currently at this starting goal, and your actions are completely out of alignment with the person that you say you want to be. This is where people like David Goggins and Atia and Tim Ferriss, whoever, this is where these guys are really valuable. Because if you can decide what you actually want in life, you don't need to have Atia's life, you don't need Tim Ferriss's life, you don't need Hormozi's life, but you do have to decide what you like, what your life wants to be, what you want your life to be. And you have to take daily actions that are in alignment with that life that you want to live. And this is the piece that I try to help people see with the self-love piece, is if you say, I want X, and that requires such and such action, and every day you are taking action in the exact opposite direction, you are choosing what you have. The way that I say this to people is, if you look down at your plate, everything that is currently on your plate is there because you said yes to it. And life is an endless, infinite buffet of options. At any point, you can throw that plate away and you can get a new one. Or you can scrape one dish off of that plate and go get a different dish that you like, but you're choosing your own reality in every moment. So like you said, I'm helping people take their own paintbrush and start to paint their masterpiece. But if we're 60 days in and they haven't picked up the paintbrush, I got to get a little strong with them. I got to get a little firm with them. I got to say, hey, listen, you're not doing the things that you said. I need to hold you accountable as your coach. And this is where I think the lack of self-love comes from, is we're programmed when we're younger. Our emotional needs are not met as children. It's the whole like, big boys don't cry, stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. Children are seen and not heard. Like, we are actually taught that our own opinions and our own intuitions don't matter. And when we're having an emotional expression, it's usually suppressed and repressed. So this is programmed in us forever. And you end up in a situation where someone wakes up and they're 40 years old. They don't like their job. Their romantic partner doesn't treat them well. They don't like where they live. They don't like anything about their life. And this is where, when you come work with a coach like me, be prepared, because you're going to tell me, I want to lose 20 pounds. That's my goal. Then we're going to tease apart your life, and you're going to realize that the entire life you've built for yourself does not support what you say you want. You're living completely out of alignment. So the number one thing that I can do is get your actions in alignment with who you say you want to be. That's where the big life transformation happens, which is why I love these lessons I've learned, like extreme ownership. You know, it's like in romantic relationships. These guys come to me and say, oh man, like my partner's treating me XYZ, blah, 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 blah. They say, my girlfriend does this and I caught her on Instagram talking to this guy and he did blah, 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 blah. Immediately, I write down everything that they're telling me. And then I go, new journal prompt for you. We're going to go back over the last 6 months and you're going to tell me every time you messaged a girl on Instagram and you did this, all the things you said your partner did, go back over 6 months, get truly honest with yourself and write down all the times you did those things. It's littered.
Yeah.
Their whole page. Oh my God, I'm doing this every day. Yeah, that's the mirror reflection.
The mirror, yeah.
Your world is a reflexive holosphere that is reflecting back to you your internal state in every moment. And this is Carl Jung's thing. Until you make the subconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate.
Yes.
That's what I'm helping people see. You create your reality in every single moment. I do masculinity coaching. Men come to me, the number one thing I do. The first exercise, we're going to go through your entire life and every relationship you have down to when the barista asks you how you're doing in the morning and you say fine when it's been a shit day. And you're going to write down every single place in your life that you're lying to people. And it transforms their life in one exercise. I say, your only job right now is radical honesty. Be honest. If there's something from 6 months ago that your partner doesn't know about that they need to know about, you're going to clear it up now. And if that means the relationship's going to end, tough. That's meant for you right now. That relationship needs to end because you need to learn a lesson of dishonesty. This is extreme ownership. You know, extreme ownership to me is not, can you swing kettlebells every day?
Yes.
That's not impressive to me. That's not hard work.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard work. I understand. Like it's a challenge. This is the hard stuff.
Yeah.
Understanding that you create your own reality and taking extreme ownership for it.
Yeah, there's levels, right?
There's levels to the game.
Like, what you are not changing, you are choosing.
100%.
And extreme ownership in that sense is to acknowledge your part in that. And it could be really hard. So yeah, maybe it has to start with you committing to 10K steps a day, but eventually it's going to get to the level where you've got to transcend that. You know, it can only take you so far. And that's why these guys and what they teach can be really helpful, as long as you realize that it's only going to get you to a certain level, and what got you here is not going to get you there. And then it's a lot of inner alchemy from that point on. It's a lot of this stuff. The Jung quote, the world is a mirror. All of these things are mental models I use too, because they're so helpful and I believe them to be true, and I don't actually care whether they're true because they're useful. And it feels like truth to me. And I'd much rather use something that's useful than be bothered whether it's true. It really helps me to view the world 100%. In that way. It really does. And it allows me to get clearer on asking the hard question, like, you say you want to be this kind of man and live this kind of life. Are you doing the things that are going to create that? And if the answer is no, well, what is that? Because it's certainly not love.
Yeah.
That's not self-love. That's living a lie. That's not telling the truth. And the greatest adventure you could possibly take is to start telling the truth. And why is that so bloody hard?
Yeah, exactly. And that's real shadow work. That's when we get into real Jungian shadow work. If you are programmed to be dishonest and withhold and not say how you feel, which a lot of us were programmed that since we were little kids.
Yeah.
You know, it's why you have so many men in relationships that are constantly feeling like they're in trouble. Oh, I did something wrong.
Yeah.
That's prince energy, man. Like when you're a little prince and your mom leaves the room and she's like, don't eat that chocolate cake. She comes back 30 minutes later, the chocolate cake is gone and you have chocolate all over your face. And she says, did you eat that cake? And you go, no, with a face full of chocolate. Little liar. You know, it's programmed in us. Like we're afraid. We're terribly afraid of telling the truth and revealing our truest selves because we don't actually love all parts of ourselves. And that's where we get to the piece, the story I told on Kyle's podcast. Like I had to come to this place where like, oh, there's parts of myself that I don't love.
Yeah.
And until I love them, nobody can fully love me. But that requires extreme ownership. So the shadow work, again, like if you're used to not telling the truth, the hardest thing you can do is not swinging kettlebells. The hardest thing you can do is tell the truth when you're like, oh my God, it feels like I'm going to die. I have to tell my partner this thing. Yep.
Yeah.
That's the thing you have to do.
Yeah.
And show up and get rep after rep after rep of doing those hard things. Your entire life will transform.
Yeah, dude, it's so powerful. It's so empowering. And I think people, they know it, whether they want to acknowledge it or not, because we all have this thing, call it a conscience, if you will, that if you're not doing that thing, you know, it's eating you alive a little bit. And maybe you're numbing that. Maybe you're drinking it away or smoking it away or pawning it away or video gaming it away. Yeah. But it's there. And unless you listen to it, it's just going to grow and grow and grow. And yeah, you'll be 40 years old with a broken marriage and a divorce and having a midlife crisis. And it's 100%. Like, how did I get here? Well, you ignored the little subtle knock from the pain teacher. You know, when you what are some of the tools that you use with clients to start them on this process? I know we talked about the self-love and the mirror exercise. Do you think there is anything that's particularly valuable about gaining a clearer insight or becoming a more finely tuned instrument for tapping into your own personal truth and actually living that?
100%. Yeah, the biggest thing you have to do is get comfortable with your own emotional expression, right? So again, I always go back to relationships. Romantic relationships are the greatest mirror. And then the even greater mirror from there is having children, which I don't have yet. But I mean, children are the ultimate little mirror.
It's a trip, bro.
Dude, there is nothing better than when parents come to me and they're like, my 5-year-old is just so picky. He'll only eat Doritos and drink Coca-Cola. What am I supposed to do about this? And I'm like, where do you think he learned? Are you kidding me? He didn't go to the grocery store and buy this stuff for himself. This is a mirror of your choices. Oh, yeah. And now you're mad at this child because they've developed a taste for what you gave them.
Yeah.
And you're having this internal experience where you're uncomfortable with your child's emotions. Yeah. So when you say, hey, we don't actually eat Doritos in this house anymore because poison, and that kid throws a tantrum, you'd rather feed the kid poison than deal with the emotional expression of that human and supporting them through that. So step one, I've actually never talked about this on a podcast, so nicely done.
Let's go.
I'm like, we got to keep something behind the wall of the one-on-one client, the one-on-one client relationship. I start with an exercise called emotional unleashing. So I actually have people, I can walk you through it, but it gets a little intense and sometimes people don't like to go here. It makes people uncomfortable because there's like a sexual expression aspect to it. But I had people literally smashing pillows, screaming, somatic release work, like moving through deep stored sexual shadows and throwing tantrums and what is it like to throw a tantrum, right? So I actually am walking people through exercises of radical self-expression of emotions that is really gnarly, and you're going to scream and you're going to cry and you're going to be like, where is this coming from? When I first learned somatic release work, I fired my talk therapist the same day.
Yep.
And I had been with that talk therapist for like 5+ years. Yep. Literally called her crying and was like, I'm sorry, our work here is done. I have found something more powerful. And she was like, wow, you know what? She's like, you've been asking me for 2 years for something more powerful, and you've been an amazing client, and you've reached the edge of what I can teach you. Yeah. And here you go on this journey, right? And that's where I found somatic work and psychedelics and all these crazy things that I've done. But basically it's this exercise where I'm walking people through radical emotional self-expression. Then from there, moving into mirror work, where you're not just saying, I love you in the mirror. You're saying, thank you for sharing that with me. Mm-hmm. That was beautiful. I want you to know that anytime you're feeling anything, you can give it to me. You can show me that side of yourself. You can throw a tantrum. You can cry and scream, and you can say, life is not fair. Fuck this. I hate everything. You can express yourself however you need to. And I'm going to tell you how beautiful you are and how perfect you are and how welcome you are to have that emotional experience, and that you having that emotional experience doesn't say anything negative about you, doesn't change my love for you. Now we're into Jedi territory, right? Now we're in Jedi personal development territory, which is, can you convince yourself? Can you feel unconditional love for yourself when you are ugly crying and playing the victim and screaming about how you hate everything and saying nasty, horrible words and letting anything pour out of your mouth, whatever, having a full-blown exorcism, loving yourself through it, holding yourself emotionally, being an unconditionally safe space for expression, and then still loving. Yeah. Training that muscle like a bicep curl. Now we're into Jedi territory. The further Jedi territory is, I literally have you in a mirror doing this for yourself. This is a theoretical mirror. Life is the real mirror. Which is why if I'm in a relationship with you as my friend, I only want your most authentic self-expression. I'm interested in a relationship with the real you, not a performer, not someone who's withholding or telling me a version of themselves that they think is more impressive. I only want to know the real you. I'm only interested in authentic relationships. If you cannot show up in authenticity, you're not ready to be my friend yet, right? So this is the next level stuff, is I can love you unconditionally no matter what you do. I can love Lane Norton unconditionally. I think Lane is probably an amazing guy. I bet we'd be friends in a lot of ways. We'd probably lift weights together, have a great time, right? Same with Peter Attia. I'd love to train jiu-jitsu with some of these guys, whatever. They hate me because of some things that I say online. Lane has said horrible things about me, you know? and I mean, I've had millions of hate videos made about me. All these big guys, James Smith and TNF Alpha and all these guys that just talk shit about me. We'd probably be homies in real life, man. Right. If we just never talked about nutrition, we'd probably be great friends, right? I think James Smith is perfect. Yeah. He's a perfect human. There's nothing wrong with him. If he walked up to me on the street as a stranger and started crying, I would hold him. Be like, I'm here for you, buddy. What do you got? What's going on? That's the Jedi stuff, man. And this is the piece where I'm like, people are running around screaming at each other online and hating each other and quack and misinformation and this and that. It's like, dude, every single one of us has unbelievable transformation stories of helping people get healthy. Why are we making videos hating each other?
Yeah, we're on the same team.
This is insane, bro.
Yeah.
You are a fragile man. You are living in your fragile masculine. Your ego is out of control, and you don't understand intimacy and love. We can get you there, you know? As I want to be like, hey, James, come work with me.
Yeah.
You'll have a great time. You'll learn really profound shit working with me. I promise you that.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll give you a safe space to express yourself, you know? And then the strong masculine piece of that level of unconditional love is also understanding that like unconditional love does not mean unconditional commitment, right? I have people in my life that I love unconditionally that don't show up and treat me the way that I allow myself to be treated. So I say, hey man, listen, when you're ready, come back, the door's always open. But I love myself too much to be treated the way you're treating me. I love you, you're perfect. You're on your own journey.
Yes.
Go have a great time. I'll always love you. If you need anything, let me know. If you want to come back to the open door and you want to try this again, I'm here to do that. You know, real blood family, whatever, all these people, anyone who I'm having trouble with. I love you unconditionally. You're perfect. That doesn't mean you get a place in my life, but I love you unconditionally. So this is the piece that's like, why would I make a clapback video at someone who makes a hit piece about me if I actually love that person and think they're perfect?
Yeah.
Why would I do that?
Yeah.
Not going to do it. Not going to play that game.
No, because that's not love. That's the ego game.
Totally.
It might be, I
100%.
could deconstruct this and I could get the one up and I could get the
100%.
ha-ha-has in the comments, but it's not that expression. And I think what you just delivered there was so valuable if people can feel into that and start to piece that together and integrate it into their own life. Because, you know, we started this conversation on your personal journey and then got into the nuances around diet, and we end at this place of really embodying where you said we start with self-love, because it's like you said, it's a Jedi level. Because if you can get to this place, the diet conversation just falls away. It's not important anymore, because you think that you can love yourself like that and feed yourself and drink yourself to death and smoke yourself to death, etc. It's a non-issue. It's not going to ooze out of the cake of your being when you feel that way. And I think, you know, you said a key word, which is safety. You know, I'll create the safe space, but ultimately what you're trying to do is create that for yourself, because when we feel safe is when we heal. And when we heal is when all of this stuff changes, whether we get down to the mitochondrial level and the energy production and how we feed ourselves and everything. It all really does come back to that. And I think it's really special and profound, and it is missing, in my opinion, from these conversations around, you know, the amount of vitamin A in liver and the amount of protein we should hit. Like, it's all really cool, and it's really cool, empowering knowledge to know. But that's the level that we want to get to. If we can get people to wear that black belt of self-love and acceptance, then I think we wouldn't have an obesity epidemic. I don't think we'd be talking about semaglutide and calories in, calories out. I think we'd just be potentially living in a much more radical existence. But maybe this is, you know, exactly how it's got to be to teach us these things.
Totally.
You know?
And the biggest piece of that I'll say that's like so important for this as well is understanding that like the levels of the game are critically important, because there's so much to be learned in this whole stepwise thing of like understanding that you're on a journey and it's not always going to be perfectly. So I always tell people that like personal development can really be a light switch decision. Like, you don't become healthy when you lose 30 pounds. You become a healthy person now, and your body will eventually manifest as health. That's what's going to happen. So this idea that you're saying of like the conversation of what to eat falls away the moment that happens, and understanding that along the way, you're going to slip up. It's going to happen, but it's your own judgment of the thing that is the problem, right? So it's this piece of like, okay, I'm now a healthy person and I'm eating off Justin's approved foods list or whatever. And then you're a few weeks in and you have a slip up or something. This is where people spiral. Yeah. They judge themselves. There's no safety there. That's the safety piece. Is like, you're not safe, because if you slip up even a little bit, you're going to destroy yourself. Yeah. Now you can't do self-love. You can't do mirror work, whatever. You're just like, oh my God, you piece of shit. You did it again. You ate the blah, 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 blah. And that's what I think people have like put themselves in this situation, like the Goggins style thing. It's like, well, if I don't get up and run every day, I am just a total sack of shit. You know, that's, you're getting into like a place of self-harm at that point. So it's trying to understand like what the unconditional love piece actually is. So if you can get to this place of really what I think is happening with the obsession with health and wellness, and again, the Goggins thing where I say like, I think he's running from internal demons or whatever, is I think the endless obsession with health and wellness What are the macros? What are seed oils doing to the phospholipid membrane? How many minutes a day did Huberman say that I have to get light on my eyeballs? I've listened to 3,000 Dave Asprey podcasts and 4,000 Mark Sisson podcasts and 8,000 Tim Ferriss podcasts. And which one is the right? Is this the perfect morning routine? Is this the thing? Oh, 30 grams of protein within 30 minutes of waking up, but then I have to do intermittent fasting. And what about the cold blood? This is an avoidance pattern for doing the work that we've talked about on this podcast.
Yeah.
That's the epidemic. People don't want to go deep. And this is where you have like Lane Norton, who's literally in his 40s screaming on YouTube videos and calling people names. He's calling people names. Bro, we're not in middle school, man. You know? So this hyper obsession with optimizing yourself to death is an avoidance pattern.
Yeah.
100%. It's an avoidance of doing the actual hard work.
Yeah.
And the hard work, the reason why it's hard is because you're not going to get it perfect.
Yeah.
You know, the kid that doesn't have biceps, bicep curls hurt the first time. Self-love hurts the first time. And then when you make a promise to yourself and then you break that promise, that hurts the first time.
Yeah.
But you get to go back in the mirror and say, hey, I forgive you.
Yeah.
You're perfect exactly as you are. We're on this journey, man. We're just doing this again. Get up tomorrow and eat the approved foods list. You know, but everyone is so scared. There's no safety. It's the same reason why people that want to be influencers don't become influencers. They're terrified of hate.
Yeah.
They are terrified of hate. You know, there are so many people with magical, amazing messages that could probably change the fucking world that won't post on Instagram because someone's going to say something about their appearance, or they're going to call them a quack, or they're going to tell them blah, 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 because they have no safety in their life.
Yeah.
I have built a life of safety. I show up for myself. I'm unconditionally safe with myself. I have a romantic partner, my fiance. I'm unconditionally safe with her, and I've proven it time and time and time again. I have authentic friends that I'm unconditionally safe with and can be unconditionally honest and open with, right? So
what's the worst that can happen if you have that, right?
It's the worst that can happen. Lane Norton can comment on my video. Take a hike, buddy. You know?
What a meanie.
Yeah, you're so mean, bro. But I love it. You're doing great. I mean, he's probably helped thousands of people.
Exactly.
He's helped young men lift weights and get stronger, and he's done super impressive things in his life. It's like none of what I'm doing right now is like hating on these guys.
Yeah.
It's an observation of the thing, of like the macro. And I think the macro is everyone feels completely unsafe. They feel unsafe with themselves. They feel unsafe on social media. Everyone's attacking everyone all the time. It's a really crazy thing. I don't get it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And again, I think it's all necessary, you know, that path might be just one of the ways to the way of which there are many ways. And
totally.
we have a different way. And a lot of what you're saying is really resonating with what I think is a way to the way. And it's just, you know, it's very refreshing. It's a very refreshing take. And I really appreciate, you know, what was shared today. And I think when you cultivate that sense of safety within yourself, when your friends around you are real, they're not just drinking buddies, they're not just guys you talk about butts with or the football, that they're real. You can have that safety largely because you're doing it for yourself and you're showing up authentically and you're attracting those kinds of people into your life. Then yes, the worst that can happen is that you fail. Yeah. And there's some beauty in that, because when you fail and you realize that the whole world doesn't crumble, that's okay. You know, you piece yourself back together and you go again. Whether you fail on your micro decision to eat 30 grams of protein, you didn't do it today. Okay, well, tomorrow is a new day. Start again, begin again. And I think, like you said, a lot of these proxy attempts to get close to this stuff, this safety or this control of all these protocols that can be useful, is not missing the most important point of like, just maybe we just need to go sit down under a tree for a long time and think, you know, and put our feet in the grass and really get clear on what it is that we want, and ask ourselves, are we willing to become that kind of person with these micro decisions every day? Little by little, a little becomes a lot. Exactly. Yeah. And that's like the ultimate form of self-love. Again, it's just like continually showing up for yourself in the way you say you will. Build self-love. There you go. There you go. What a beautiful way to bring it home. Where can people continue to keep up with you or potentially check out the groups, the Facebook page, coaching, all of that stuff? Tell them where to go. Yeah. So all of my handles on social media are at the Clovis Culture, CLOVISCULTURE, at the Clovis Culture. I have the Clovis Culture podcast. And then I can make like a URL for, you say RHR, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll just do justinnault.com/RHR. You can watch a free training video about my overall idea of how the human metabolism works if you want to dive into that. Love that. And then from there, you can get in touch with me however you want to. Amazing. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. Thank you, man. This was fantastic. Humans out there, keep humaning, stay radical. Thank you. Peace out, bro. Thanks. All right, friends, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Radical Health Radio. We got a fresh new podcast for you every Wednesday. If you enjoyed the show, consider liking, subscribing, reviewing, and rating us on your podcast platform. It helps to spread this message of radical health. We'll see you next week.